Now, our next speaker, almost ready to go? Good, good, good. His name is Duncan Lamb, and Duncan comes from TransferWise, and he is the design leader. That's got to be quite a responsibility. But this gentleman certainly has the background from this. He was the creative director at Nokia and the head of product design at Skype, and he's going to talk to you today about how do you know when your design is good. And how do you know that it's worth to put all that effort into making a good design? So ladies and gentlemen, please have a round of applause for Duncan Lamb.
Hello there. How are you? Let's make something good. Let's do that. So, all right, let's have a quick poll. Who in this room would identify as an engineer? And who would identify as a designer? And who would identify as neither of the above? Weirdos. Okay, cool. Who's heard of lean? Who does lean? That's not good grammar. Who is lean? Okay, good. Well, I like lean. And what's not to like? Iterative, customer-driven, quick shipping cycles, getting more out of less faster. What's not to love about that? Well, ask any builder, like someone that actually does things with their hands, and they'll tell you a project can be fast, it can be cheap, and it can be good, but you only get to pick two. And the thing about lean is it drives fast and cheap. So here's my dilemma. I really believe in good. I really believe in quality, because I believe quality creates emotions. I think quality creates an emotional response in people. It persuades them, it reassures them, it hooks them. And I think if people don't have an emotional reaction, if they don't emotionally engage with your product, then they don't engage at all. So emotions drive engagement, and engagement drives growth. A guy called Paul Dolan wrote the coincidentally named book, Designing Happiness. It's a self-help book. You'll love it. And he puts forward the idea that happiness exists in a balance between pleasure and purpose. And I think the same thing applies to products. If you have a really purposeful product, but there's no joy, no fun, then that feels a lot like work. And in the 21st century, there's not too many of us queuing up for more work. Designers in other fields, fashion, advertising, automotive, they're way ahead of us. They lead with the creation of feelings. So this is a restaurant in Helsinki called Finjävel, and the design studio, Atelier Sotama, they created 147 individual, unique pieces for this restaurant. And they had local craftspeople make these pieces, all with the goal of creating a complete sensory experience. So it wasn't just about the food, it was about an entire emotional sensory experience. They could have just gone to IKEA. That's what most of us would have done, right? So we in tech, we're a little bit further behind. We tend to be way too busy high-fiving ourselves about our awesome technology and what it can functionally do, and think less about the sensations, the feelings, the emotions that creates. So here's a nice quote from a clever person. Here's another nice quote from another clever person. And here's another quote. So, I've been trying to figure out why this is. Why we in tech, why we're behind with this. Why does this don't worry, be crappy thing, what is that? Why is that here? So here are a few of the things that I've learned, and some of them may not be true. So just go easy on me. So the first one I wanted to talk about was the ease of measurement bias. So we're all quantitatively driven as lean practitioners, right? We practice innovation accounting. We're all cool with analytics. What that tends to do is make us biased towards the things we can measure. So we pay more attention to the things which are more easy to measure and less attention to the things which are harder to measure. Emotion and quality are really hard to measure, so it's tempting to pay less attention to them. Also works in some other areas of life. The second thing that I've learned is, wow, we confuse the word feasible with the word viable. So a really, really central component of lean is the idea of a minimum viable product, an MVP. But what I've noticed is a lot of the time we're making MFPs, we're making minimum feasible products. And that's because we bias towards the things that we can build rather than the things that we should build. We bias towards the things which are easier to implement, the low-hanging fruit. Everyone has heard and uses that term. So we make the things which are easier to build more willingly than the things that might have more impact. We confuse feasible with viable. That's a boat. You probably wouldn't want to go sailing in it. Nothing away from my son. He's a very talented guy. We like making lots of things, as opposed to, like doing a lot of things, as opposed to doing one thing well. And I think there's a couple of reasons for that. One is that there's a belief, a reasonable belief, that the more experiments we do, the more things we put out there, the more likely we are to find something that works, right? You throw enough stuff up on the wall and something's going to stick. I think the other reason why we bias quantity over quality is because we're human and we like the next shiny object. We get bored. It's not very fun to finish stuff. It's way more fun to start stuff. So as we speed along putting out our MVPs and our experiments, our products tend to turn out like this. We build up a huge amount of design debt, technical debt. I'll talk about this in a little bit more. So the last thing that I've learned about why it is that we are less further behind in tech than some of our other colleagues is because MacGyver. Because we are really pragmatic people. We're practical people. We admire functionality more than form. It works, so it's good, right? Well, there is a persistent belief that design can be added as a layer afterwards. That's not design, that's styling. You'll notice when you build a company, you, us, we tend to hire engineers first before designers. Because engineers can build stuff, whereas designers just talk about building stuff. I think TransferWise was like north of 150 people before they hired the first designer. Shall I go back to the teenager's bedroom? Okay, so what? So what's the problem? Well, we operate in very competitive spaces. Take London, for example. I think as of today, there are probably somewhere between 12 and 15 apps, all competing for the privilege of delivering takeaway food to your door by bicycle. Very, very competitive. We may be very proud of the technology that we built, but the chances are that if not today, probably tomorrow, that technology is going to be commoditized, and we will have no competitive advantage. And as soon as some other cat comes along with an interface, with an experience that makes people smile, that makes them feel empowered, that makes them tell their friends, they will churn away. Believe me, I know. So, okay, so what we're going to do? Okay, we're all doomed. So what are we going to do about this? Well, one of our founders, Tarvit, he asked me a bit ago, how do we know, how good is good enough? I think was the question. What it made me think was like, well, first of all, what's good? What is this words, quality, good, that I keep babbling on about? They're very fuzzy, they're very hand-wavy. So I think of the antidotes, I'm not going to call them solutions, but the ideas that I'm going to talk through now. The first thing is you need to kind of unpack these big, fuzzy words. The problem with a word like that is it encourages this kind of, well, I'll know it when I see it. And that doesn't scale, because then you have, idiots like me sitting around and going, me, I like it. Me, not so much. So you've got to unpack it. You need a framework. You need words that everyone can share and understand. So this is what I'm just trying at the moment. Something is good when it does the job, when it's built right, and when it's aesthetic. And the cool thing about this is when you unpack it as such, is you can start to have conversations about things. You can say, okay, does it do the job? Is it built right? You can have these shared conversations in the group. The other nice thing is you can actually create scorecards for these. So for the people that need to see numbers and graphs and bars and charts to believe, you can build those up around things like this. And I'm not saying that this particular breakout is right for everyone, but this is how I'm starting to think. So let's talk through these three things. So does the job? Okay, well, we build products to solve problems. We build products to meet a user need. We don't build them, I hope we don't build them just because it's fun. We build them to help people. And so understanding, okay, what is the problem that they have? What have we built? And is there a match? That's not particularly hard. You can see that in your analytics data when you put things live. You can see it in user tests. So you can devise very clever, nerdy things like system usability scores. But what I'm saying is you can have a scorecard and tick this, tick off and agree in the team, okay, does this do the job? And see that both qualitatively and quantitatively. So the second one, built right. Well, you have to have a notion of what right is. So built right basically boils down to 0 bugs, which all the engineers in the room, all 5 of you, are going to be smiling now. So 0 bugs. Well, you need the definition of right, which typically is a style guide, for example. So if you have a style guide, and then you have your thing that you just built, and you compare the two, and you're like, yeah, okay, it works, it's good, it's built right. Performance is another aspect. If you can set thresholds for how snappy your pages should be. both sort of theoretically and also specifically for whatever your use case is. The third one is trickier. You can call it aesthetic, you can call it character, if you like. But it's basically, does the look and feel and tone of your product create the kind of emotions in your customers that support your business goals? So at TransferWise, that is trust and loyalty and passion. Those are the three emotions that we've decided, we've learned we need to provoke in people. Trust, loyalty, and passion. Does everyone know why I'm showing this picture right now? No, anyone? Awesome. I'll explain it. So when these two guys were fighting out an election in the States, I'm not quite sure which agency did it, but there was a piece of research done about trustworthiness. And what they did was they took a sample of folks who'd watched a presidential debate between Kennedy and Nixon on a television, and they took a sample of people who'd listened to the debate on the radio. And the people who listened on the radio believed that Nixon had won the debate. He was the more credible, he was the more trustworthy, and he was the more appropriate to be president. And the people who watched the debate on television believed that JFK had won the debate, that he was the more credible, that he was the more trustworthy. Because Nixon looked like Nixon, and he was sweating, and he was moving around a lot. It was nothing to do with what he was saying. And this is something coming back to my earlier point about how we as technologists, as these MacGyver-type guys who can sticky tape and duct tape any old paperclip together and go, ta-da. This is something we really need to understand and learn from our fashion design and our interior design and our architecture colleagues, is that how something looks and feels is what makes the difference as to whether people engage with it, whether they buy it, whether they keep using it, whether they tell their friends. Back in the days when hi-fis used to be a thing, you could go into a hi-fi store and watch dudes mostly buy a hi-fi. And what they would do was they would play with the volume knob and they would press the tape deck ejector or the CD tray ejector and kind of feel sensorially how the CD drawer came in and out. And that was amazingly more important than how it sounded. Go to a car dealership and watch, again, dudes mostly, buy a car. They shut the door like, boom, like this. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of Germans who have dedicated their careers to that feel of how a car door shuts, because that sells cars. JFK won because he's a handsome devil. So that's what I mean by aesthetic, coming back to that thing. So first thing, how do we solve this problem? Okay, we create a framework to talk about quality and to measure quality. The second thing is tooling. We need a kit of parts of assured quality that we can quickly use to build up our experiments. Safe in the knowledge that when we pull this brick and that brick and that brick and we put it together, it's going to come out right, or left in this case. So the GDS folks talked about this morning, and I cannot stress the importance of it enough. It feels like work up front. It feels like time away from actually building your product. So most lean, startup, sensible entrepreneur people are like, yeah, but we're not learning for customers. We need to just, come on, just build it. Yeah, let's do this. it's 2016. We should have learned this by now. Like I said, the GDS guys, I mean, their whole thing is built up on this fantastic pattern library. Search the internet, read on Medium. It's full of designers whining about how when they first joined this company, that company, the other company, it's like, oh, when I first joined this, the whole thing was just a hot mess. You saw the slide that they showed. Every designer that joins every company finds that hot mess. It's like walking into that teenager's bedroom. And the solution is you've got to take the time, you've got to build your set of Lego bricks, and then you can start running real fast and evolving them over time. It's the same with how we test and deploy and ship. Some really interesting words, like, again, this comes down to language and the vocabulary that you put into people's heads, what I affectionately call CIA tactics. It's really handy to talk about an alpha or a beta, or this thing is gold, this thing is live. Because it gets clear in everyone's head, we're still working on this thing. When you talk about everything as an MVP, that's sort of code word for, oh, I'm a bit embarrassed about that, but we'll move it along. So calling something a beta, even internally, is a really important crutch for getting people to think, well, we're still working on this, we're still making this better, we're still perfecting and polishing this thing, as opposed to, hey, let's move on to the next thing, it'll be awesome. Oh, that's some very nice work by someone on my team that I get to take credit for, which is awesome. Kit of parts. All right. The third and final and most important remedy for this situation we find ourselves in is culture. The C word. There are lots of different paths to take to foster and create a culture of quality in a company of any size. So you can have a despotic dictator CEO who goes around firing people if there are visible screws on the back of the product. It works, right? Or you can be second in a given market. And the person you're chasing is so obviously, so clearly far ahead of you in the quality of their product, you have no option but to chase them. It works. Neither of these things works terribly well for us at TransferWise. We have a culture of empowerment and ownership through autonomy. And so the idea of this guy running around yelling at people, well, we don't, have you seen a bank recently? Yeah, so there's no like clear person to chase. So we need something different. It really just comes down to caring, to getting people to care about their craft, to believe that the stuff they put out there is a representation of themselves, and therefore to care about it. If you want to make companies that make good quality products, you have to hire people who care about quality. Thank you.
Very nice. Do we have any questions? Surely we must have a couple of questions for Duncan. You were too good. You were too good.
Too quick, mate.
Mate, I've heard that before. All right. Anyone wants to ask something about the design philosophy, something, or maybe about how you, I mean, how do you, are you involved with, I mean, you're heading the product, are you involved with hiring?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So that's your thing. What do you look for? How do you spot that? Is it just the thing or?
Dress sense.
Dress sense, okay. I don't win. I'm sorry, I don't get the job.
Nice socks, though.
Oh, thank you. Carby can do it, so can I. Cool. So
that was a shit answer, wasn't it? Let's try that again.
What are you looking when someone, you're looking for that thing that they've got, that caring, you talked about these things.
Yeah, I think it's people, basically, as designers, we make things for other people. Mm-hmm. So like any carer, you have to, you look for people who have an absence of ego and who genuinely care and believe in the problem that they're solving and the people that they're solving it for. So what that means in interviews is, do people talk about the problems that they're solving and the people they're solving them for, or do they talk about their struggles and trials with this and that and the other? Okay. I think it's very, like interviewing generally, not just designers, is a bit like how you pick your friends as well. Like, do they care about other people and about the craft and the details? And yeah, it's important.
Okay. So it's like not only, I guess it's important to care about your own stuff as well, but that they're mentioning others and how they interacted with the team. And
yeah. Well, that's why we're here, right? We're trying to make
everyone
life a bit nicer for other people.
Do nicer design. I think that's probably the first thing that I learned from my designer in my company was, I was told like, this work is a reflection of the designer. So, and I had never encountered that idea before. I just thought there was a company and it was a brand and then that's it. And then that someone cared, that they thought that that was being reflected, kind of blew me away. And I think you reflected that in your talk.
And it's not just about making the logo bigger.
Right. Do we have anything up there? No, do we? Caring as a proxy, very good.
Anything at all.
Even about, I don't know, who's going to... Here we go, up here, very good.
Marcus has a question.
Must be something.
Do it.
Hey, thanks for the great talk. One question. The current state of TransferWise, in your opinion, is it good?
No.
Well, okay, like if you ask my kids, they'll say I'm a perfectionist. So nothing's ever good. I'm going to be paying their therapy bills for years. No. It works, and a lot of people are extremely passionate about it, which is fantastic. And not just the people that work there, actually the customers too. I think where we need to get better is particularly around things like this idea of a kit of parts. So I talked a bit about JFK and German car doors, but one of the keys to trust. So okay, going way back, trust is a huge thing. See, look, I've got.
That's fine. You're good. Don't worry about that.
57 seconds.
Good. Go for it. Go. Don't worry about that.
So trust is fundamental, right? We're a website. And we're saying to this nice lady in New Jersey who's trying to send some money to her son in France, trust us with your money. Just pay your money in here and it'll magically pop out the other end. And that's a massive leap for people to make. And I don't think we always appreciate that, right? So we move fast, we try all sorts of different things. We don't have this kit of parts. So that creates a lot of fragmentation in the UI. And even though I don't think that lady in New Jersey is looking at our UI and going, ooh, that alignment's a bit off, she feels it. I was talking with one of our team who helps protect TransferWise customers from money laundering activities. And she, it turns out, has this sixth sense for dodgy websites. She can look at a website, so she does all the due diligence, right? And she can look at a website and just go, yeah, that's not real. That's a So I said, all right, so why don't you look at some of our stuff? And she looked at it and went, Jesus, what kind of business are you running here? So even though most people can't articulate that on their conscious level, on their, with their prefrontal cortex and the thinking bit of the brain, their lizard brain is just going, whoa, 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 that button, I think we have a huge amount to do in terms of really nailing the aesthetics of trust and then the execution of those aesthetics.
You've said that the aesthetics of trust, that someone's going to see it and feel good and trust that.
Yeah.
Can you identify one element? What's the car door of TransferWise?
It is, oh, wow, there's lots of car doors, a lot of cup holders as well.
Is there some element in the process?
Yeah,
that makes
there are key moments. I think at the very beginning, helping people understand that there is a problem. There are a lot of people who will come to TransferWise because maybe a family member said, oh, you know, I know you send money, you should check this out. And so they go there and they're like, huh, but my bank only charges me £9 or £4.50 for this thing. And so a big part is visually and very accessibly explaining that there's this problem, there's this idea that, like, yeah, they say that's what they're charging, but then they also add this margin in the rate, and we get into this really nerdy stuff of like exchange rates and spreads and all this kind of thing. But just to be able to visually show when someone comes to the site, like, hey, here's the problem, this is the issue, and then their penny drops, and they're like, oh my, and then they get angry, and maybe they have to go off and have a cup of tea, and then they come back. I think that's a big part. But then in the product, there are these, you know when someone says, oh, it's a seamless user experience?
Okay, sure. Give me
No. Every experience has seams. Okay. Think of them like speed bumps, or whether it's like you half do something and then you pick it up on your phone, or you do something and then you get an email. That's a seam, right? And the trick is not to try to get rid of those seams, it's to take advantage of them and just make them nice seams. And so we have one where we sometimes need to ask our customers to prove they are who they say they are. And that is a deeply unpleasant experience for people, because it's us saying, hey, we don't trust you. And we'd like to see your passport or your driver's license.
Documents?
Or in America, it's like, why don't you tell us your social security number? Which again comes back to the aesthetics of trust. How do you ask someone for something which is incredibly personal information in a way that that makes them feel like, okay, nothing bad is going to happen. This is for my good. This is for my benefit. I'm going to do it. Those are the moments which are not the car doors right now, but they can be.
Right, because someone's going to get to that and they'll be like, oh, I'm not uploading my passport or whatever it is.
If you do that in a really nice way, then you win. Like, even though it was an unpleasant experience, it's okay, I was going to go somewhere else, but it's fine.
Okay.
Let's not do that.
All right. Anything? Okay, one more there. This is pretty interesting. We'll do one more.
Yeah. Thank you for the great talk. You mentioned before that TransferWise got its designers too late. If you're starting new company and you have very limited budget, at what point do you feel that the company should get a designer, and what do you think about replacing designer with Bootstrap?
Did that just happen? All right. Okay. So if you look at, it's very faddish to call it out, maybe just because Fast Company love it, but the companies that are founded by designers tend to get this stuff a lot better. The best example I can throw out today is Airbnb. Where those guys went to design school, and they already had 2 designers from day one. So they understood the emotional side, which in their case is also trust. Joe Gebbia has this amazing stunt that he does at talks where he says to everyone to illustrate the feeling that hosts have when they let people in, and I can steal it and use it to illustrate the feeling people have when they send money with us, which is he asks everyone to get out their phones from their pockets. Come on, let's do it.
All right, get your phones out.
All right, so you take out your phone.
Oh yeah, sorry.
And then you unlock it. Yeah.
Okay.
And then you pass it to the person next to you.
Here we go. Gotta go.
Right. Photos.
I know.
Can I have my phone back?
All right. See, he didn't even want it for that long.
Right?
No trust. No issue of trust here.
That feeling that you get of like, that's, okay. So that's empathy. And the sooner you get the empathy muscle in your company, the better. So the answer to your question is as soon as possible, but you need to hire a designer, not a stylist. And there's a bunch of really cool articles out there written by, I think the Intercom guys are really good at this, which is don't go on Dribble and look for a designer. It's a stylist. You need a designer, and the empathy muscle is what you're looking for. The last question, can you replace a designer with Bootstrap? If you ever get to the point where your kit of parts, your Lego bricks, which is basically what Bootstrap is along with a bunch of other frameworks, if you ever get to the point where that is like defined and solid and working for you, that you can fire your designer, I'd be super surprised. Or then your product's really boring. I don't know, maybe.
Of course you would say that.
Right.
Of course. All right, I think we'll probably end it there then, because we should end the session. Thank you very much. Please, one more round of applause for Duncan. Fascinating talk.